Hey there, mate. Stuart Charles here, HomeStudioBasics.com, helping you make sound decisions. So, today we're going to get into the FiiO K5 and compare it to the K3. Big shout out to FiiO for sending me both of these units. I'm not being compensated for this review or comparison, and they are nice enough to let me keep the units. So, big thanks to them for their continued support. So, let's get right into the build quality. The K3 is of course much smaller than the K5. I did a K3 versus E10K comparison that I'll link up here. The K3 comes in at 82 grams versus 436 for the K5. So obviously the K5 is a little bit heavier, feels pretty substantial. It's an all aluminum chassis. Not as heavy as the Zen DAC, amp DAC at 1.08 pounds. But this is getting there. I mean, it doesn't feel cheap at all. It just feels a little bit lighter. It's basically a rounded rectangle type of shape. The K3 is also rounded off, but obviously much smaller. Both are desktop amps. The K3 does run off bus power exclusively, while you get a 15 volt DC power jack for the K5. Yeah, you're just basically going to keep it plugged in full time on your desktop. It makes a great desktop amp. We'll get into that in a bit, but as far as build goes, both of the units feel solid. Like I said, the K5 feels really good. The K3 also feels really good for what it is. I mean, it's tiny. It definitely was an upgrade build-wise over the E10K, so that's good. But neither of these feel cheap, so that's definitely a plus. Now the K3 does come with adhesive rubber feet, while the K5s are actually built in, similar to the Zen. So we're not going to get into a shootout here. Don't make a big thing out of it, Spider.
I'll make a big fucking thing out of it, Spider, you little prick.
The knobs on both feel really good. Both have the ADC volume control, which minimizes or completely negates channel imbalance issues at lower volumes. So if you turn down the music all the way, you might hear a little bit of an imbalance, but still, I mean, it's a very precise. Both have very precise turning mechanisms to get the exact volume that you want when you're listening. And to turn it on, you just turn the knob and it makes a clicking sound on both. Yeah, both knobs feel really solid. The K3's has the circular white dot to indicate where you are on your clock versus the rounded rectangular line present on the K5. Yeah, let's get into features and usage. The K5 utilizes USB Type B, while the K3 utilizes Type C, which was an upgrade again from the micro USB present in the E10K. The K3 only has the Type C USB input, while the K5 has the coaxial input, the optical input, and two pairs of analog, one pair of inputs and one pair of outputs. Now the K3's outputs include the coaxial out and the optical out, and the line out. So a little bit of polar opposites here. The K3 will not work for console gaming because it does not support optical in, rather optical out. So anything in your home theater that supports coaxial in or optical in works with the K3, versus the K5 does work for console gaming because it does support optical in and supports coaxial, and so anything in your home theater that outputs coax or optical will work with this. So that's really cool. I think in terms of versatility, I do like the K5 better than the K3. It's really no contest. I'm finding a lot more uses out of the K5, though I still really like the inclusion of the line out on the K3. That really makes it valuable in the fact that I really don't want to sell it. I always have a use for a K3 in my studio. So yeah, they're a little bit different, but I really love the K5 Pro for console gaming in particular. It's now my main console rig. Obviously works really good for desktop music listening and gaming, but the K3 also works for desktop music listening and gaming. It just doesn't work for console gaming. So the K5 has the 1/4-inch headphone jack on the front, whereas the K3 has a balanced 2.5mm jack and a 3.5mm jack. The K3 does have a bass boost and gain switch on the front, whereas the K5 Pro only has the 3-gain stage on the front and no bass boost. I really do love the gain switch on the front of the K5 Pro. It's really easy to flick and tick and switch and bitch, and it has 3 separate options, so you're never really going to run out of power here. We'll get into power in a second, but yeah, also on the front of the K5 Pro is the input. So for USB, you'll switch it to 1. For analog, it'll be on 2, and for coax and optical, switch it to 3. Now I switch mine to 3 obviously when I'm playing Fallout or Outer Worlds or whatever game. With the K5, another great thing you can do with it is you can output it to studio monitors, and you can use the inputs from a wireless DAC like the Zen Blue, or just a separate DAC that supports RCA out. It's a really great all-around unit for the price. I mean, for what you're paying here, about $150, you're getting so much, and it's just extremely versatile in all regards. So definitely, I think, an upgrade over a K3 in most facets. Yeah, both do support DSD. Now you guys know how I feel about DSD. I will just give you some Batman for that, and place a link down below for an article that Cambridge Audio did that I always reference when I'm talking about DSD, because it's spot on. So the only difference is that the K5 Pro does support native 512, whereas the K3 supports DSD 64, 128, and 256. So small differences there. And obviously the K5 supports up to 256 as well, plus the 512 native. Both have the same color code indicators on the front where their volume knob is. So when you're listening to a PCM file below 48K, both will light up blue. When you're listening to a PCM file above 48K, both will light yellow. And when you're listening to a DSD file, both will light green. So definite similarities as far as that's concerned. The K3 has an output impedance of less than 1.04, while the K5 Pro has an output impedance of 1.2. We'll get into the implications of what this actually means when you're listening to music, but yeah, total harmonic distortion is the same at 0.004. The K3 does support 32-bit up to 384K files, while the K5 supports up to 32-bit 768K. So just a little difference there. So why don't we get into ergonomics and power output now? The K5 Pro supplies 1.5 watts into 32 ohms and is rated for anywhere from 16 to 300 ohm headphones. Now, with that said, I would definitely feel comfortable driving a Hi-Fi Man lower sensitivity type headphone like the Sundara or the 400i, 400s. Also would feel comfortable driving lower sensitivity AKG headphones as well as Odyssey headphones. So yeah, the 3-gain stage is pretty amazing in that you're always going to have plenty of power for any headphone you need. I would say the majority of headphones will pair very well with this amp as far as power is concerned. So by contrast, the K3 is a little bit underpowered. Definitely a little less power than its older brother, the E10K. So that was a little bit of a step back for FiiO as far as that's concerned. But I still say, it drives an HT600, and gets loud enough, but just barely. I mean, you're gonna be maxing out the gain and the volume knob, but it does work. So, but anything over that, anything over 300 ohms, and anything less than 97 dB of sensitivity, I would not recommend with the K3. Out of the 3.5 mil jack, it supplies 220 milliwatts into 16 ohms and 120 milliwatts into 32 ohms. Now with the 2.5 mil jack, you're getting 320 milliwatts at 16 ohm and 200 milliwatts at 32 ohms. So a little bit more, but when you think about the fact that the E10K, I think, supplied 200 or 220 out of the standard 3.5 jack, I mean, it definitely is a little bit underpowered. As far as the K5 Pro is concerned, it doesn't supply as much as I think a shit Magni gave you 2 watts, and definitely has more power, but that amp is dog shit. So there's that. As far as the sound profile of both of these, it's a fairly easy comparison. Now, the The K5, we discussed output impedance earlier, and that is a pretty good indicator of how an amp is going to sound. So the K3's output impedance was a little bit lower than the K5's. And basically that means that the K3 is going to give you a more neutral presentation, a little colder, a little more clinical and sterile, a little bit more maybe sometimes brash, not brash, but a little bit, I don't know, a little bit abrasive. But that's only when you're comparing them side by side. On its own, the K3 sounds really, really fantastic. It's just that pitting it up against the K5, you'll notice that it's a little bit more in your face. Vocals are definitely more prominent, whereas with the K5 you're getting a warmer, lusher, more inviting sound, a more relaxed, syrupy type of laid back, chill out type of vibe. Brash doesn't necessarily denote a negative connotation as far as the K3 is concerned, but in relation to the K5, it's definitely more in your face, more forward, and more aggressive sounding. Now this observation was most apparent on Common's Little Chicago Boy. He just sounds more forward and more in your face, a little bit more aggressive, a little edgier sounding than the K5. So the K3 is just, it's going to be a little bit more prominent and forward with regard to vocals and instruments too. It kind of jumps out at you, whereas the K5, it sounds warmer, more relaxed, and more laid back. It's just a more inviting sound. It's the type of sound you want to kick back with, put your feet up. Yeah. And these notions only continued on Doves in the Wind by Kendrick Lamar and Odie's Noise and Night Terrific. Through the K3 you can make out subtle vocal inflections from these artists, whereas with the K5, Common as well as Odie comes across as more as warmer. Yeah, so the K3 it's just gonna sound a little snappier in comparison, or by contrast, versus the more luscious, laid back warmth of the K5. Which of these you go with really depends on what you hope to accomplish in your studio space or your listening environment. If you need an amp for console gaming as well as PC gaming, you need an amp that supports coaxial in or optical in for hookup with any of your home theater type of components that support optical out. You need an amp that can output to studio monitors or can be utilized with the RCA line ins for hookup to separate Bluetooth DACs like the Zen Blue, or just separate DACs altogether that support RCA out. Then you're definitely going to want to pick up a K5. I mean, this thing is extremely versatile and just an all-around fantastic investment for what it is, what you're getting. Its versatility, its gain stage features, its quarter-inch jack on the front, its power, output specs are really good for the price you're paying. It's not to say the K3 is a bad amp. If you're more of like a beginner audiophile enthusiast, you're just getting your feet wet, maybe you have headphones that have lower impedance, a little bit higher sensitivity, don't need as much power, and you maybe want to upgrade amps down the road, the K3 is a perfect investment because you can always hook it up to a separate amp like the Atom via its 3.5mm line out. Now JDS products mostly always support line in, so that's really cool. You can pair this with a lot of different things, and on its own it also makes a great desktop amp or PC gaming amp. So it really depends on your needs and what makes most sense to you. Now if it was up to me, I would definitely purchase the K5 every day and twice on Sunday, homie. For desktop amps, as of right now, definitely the K5 Pro, the IFI Zen, and the Atom are my top 3 recommendations. I see these 3 sticking around for a long time. I mean, there's always going to be other amps and stuff like that, but as far as price point and features and stuff like that and sound quality, I think these 3 are definitely top dog in this category. So yeah, that's about it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave me some love down below and don't forget to subscribe. If you like what I do here and you want to support the channel, hit that Patreon link down below, and always remember, don't feed the troll.
Check. Review brought to you by Stu. Here's the coda. I'm nasty on the mic. Call me warm soda. Chopped up this beat real fine like cold produce. Steady in my veggies so I can focus on my David Copperfield. Y'all hocus pocus. A little loopy when I wrote this. Esoteric dopeness. Cultivating the will of a soldier. Fighting through the pain like Dooku. I told ya, sold you on my style. Snapping on cats like Private Pile. I get semi-wild every once in a while. 911 on the dial. Alone at the top with no rival. Dark is my world without a Bible. Without God's love there's no survival. So my mindset is tribal. Yeah, my mindset is tribal. Yeah, my mindset is tribal.
I'm talking way too fast. Jeez.
I respect this. He's got a lot of fucking balls.